ahead and record. And wonderful. Okay, well, I just want to introduce myself, Katie Fascinello, facilitator of the Strengthening Communications Network. And I'm so happy. If folks joined us last year, we brainstormed a lot of what this group would be this year and took a lot of notes on topics that we wanted to cover, one of which were low-cost paid social and paid media. And it just so happened that Brigette Swartz from Colorado Parent reached out shortly after our last meeting. And I also reached out to John at CenterTable to put together a small little panel of experts and talk about some questions on those two topics. And so want to turn it over to Brigette first because she's going to present some information about reaching parents. And then I'll turn it over to open it up rather to John and Brigette. And if everyone can just chat their name and their organization so that they can kind of have an idea of who all is here today. And we'll go ahead and get started with you, Brigette.
Great, thank you. And thanks, Katie, for having me. The timing was like impeccable. We literally like talked and you were like, hey, that's exactly the topic we're going to be doing. So I appreciate the opportunity. Just a little bit of background really quick. I have been at Colorado Parent on and off for about 15 years. So have seen a lot of growth and, changes through the media landscape as we all have over the years. But the main thing is, Colorado Parent has remained a, great community resource for moms. And I just wanted to share a little bit of information about some different opportunities that we have to reach those moms. And a lot of folks think we're only a magazine, but we do a whole lot more. So I'm just going to kind of walk through some of that and I can answer some questions. And I also want to provide some budget-friendly ideas and then also even some, non-paid ideas too, just for being in this space for a very long time. So I'm going to share my screen really quick. If you give me a second, hopefully my tech skills are good here. Maybe. Why is this not showing? Okay, hold on one second. Sorry, this share is like different than usual. Hold on a second. Sorry, hold on. I'm having technical issues, of course.
It always happens.
I know, right?
Just talking.
Why does it not let me share? Sorry, hold on. Katie, I don't know why it's not working. Seriously, never had this issue before. Hold on a second. Well, on second thought, I don't know, John, are you ready to kind of jump in and I'll try to figure out my technical difficulties here?
I certainly can. Katie, if you want to kick it off.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead? Sorry.
I had planned to just kind of pose some questions to you both, and you're also, Brigette, you're welcome to email me, and I can also try to.
Yeah, why don't we try that? I have no idea why that's happening.
Or chat me a link or anything that I could present. But I guess just kind of opening it up to you, if someone is trying to reach, first talking about parents, I think one of the barriers that folks often think about is that creative content design part and working with you all. And I think I carved out about $1,000 to $1,500 for a very small digital ad buy. And I was such a scramble that I didn't have the time to put together my own creative. And I was so, I think that's something that is just a mental barrier for a lot of, childcare or smaller organizations. So if you could talk a little bit about the process and kind of some of those price points that people might think, oh, that's print media, and do a lot more there.
Sure. Yeah. So one of the great things about Colorado Parent is, we do work with all sizes of clients, but a lot of them are smaller businesses, and we provide creative services as part of your marketing. So if, you're doing a small ad or, whatever size ad or social media post, things like that, we would ask for the content from you, but then our creative team would actually proof it and design that all for you. So that can be a really nice bonus, because you don't have to go out and find a graphic designer and, have this whole other vendor that you have to deal with. You can do it all sort of in one place with us. So I know that's super helpful for a lot of folks. And that goes for social media posts, digital banners, and any kind of print.
And I did just get your presentation. So if you want to bear with me for a second, and I'll try to.
Hopefully you have better luck.
Yeah, I'll try to share my screen. How's that?
Perfect.
There you go.
Cool.
Okay.
So yeah, so I was just going to walk through just a little bit of details with you guys about Colorado Parent, in case you're not familiar with us. We've been a trusted resource. I don't know, can you guys see the whole page? Because there should be some more info down below.
Would you like me to?
Yeah, actually, can you scroll back down? Sorry. I can only see part of it. So, okay. So we've been in the market for about 35 years. So we are a trusted resource with families. And the interesting place about being in the family world, as you guys can all attest to, is like, you always have new readers and new families and new parents with, children under 5. And then, they age out. So we're constantly replenishing our readership. And just always, continue to provide great content. A couple other things to know is we are free. So that, so we are advertiser driven. But the great thing too is that we're highly accessible to anyone. Most moms will pick us up at Safeway locations, for instance. And just to give you guys a little bit of background, during COVID, majority of our distribution is normally in single point locations where moms were frequenting. But because most of those were closed, we actually have still been able to publish and get our magazines out through community newspaper partnerships. So they've actually helped us get those directly to homes throughout the metro area. Our magazine is primarily focused on the 7-county metro Denver area as far as the distribution area. So if you do have folks, or if your business or your center is located outside that, we do have other ways to help you still reach families. But I wouldn't recommend the magazine necessarily in that case. But we do have an extensive parent audience. And a lot of folks think that we're just the magazine, but we do have email newsletters that we do. We've got a really great website, which obviously is accessible to anyone throughout the state at coloradoparent.com. Welcome you guys to check it out. And then we also have our social media channels, primarily Facebook and Instagram.
So I know for me, I was able to put together a package where with that kind of low budget amount that was digital, and worked with the account contact to do some sponsored content that I wrote, which is sort of a fun trend that people are using. Can you talk a little bit about that process and what that might look like for someone?
Sure. So we've got a couple of different types of newsletters. One of them is our weekly newsletter, which is a little bit more editorial based. So that has content, from our editorial staff, but there is a spot on that newsletter where it's called sponsored content, where you can write and publish or not even publish, but you guys could have some content that you've created, and basically you get a headline. And I wish I could show you an example. I'm so sorry. But I'll definitely send that out in the information that I send after this. But so basically you're able to, be a thought leader and an expert in your field. And it shows up in our newsletter, people click on it, and then they can go to your website where your content is held. If you wanted to, I'm sorry. And so, so that's a great way to engage folks. That's not just necessarily an ad saying like, hi, we've got these openings, but saying why you guys are, the leaders in your community for early childhood education.
So
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say that particular newsletter, we've got about 25,000 parents that are signed up for that.
So I took a shot at being super funny and doing, I think it's been so many months, but I think it was like the top 10 music, Disney songs that play in my mind through the pandemic. And it was really just a funny take on getting social connections idea out there, and just harkening back to a little bit of self-care and identifying. And so that was just a fun way to try to not go direct at someone with an advertisement, but we coupled that with the static ads, and even I think y'all did a little bit of dynamic gift ad for us on your website too. So
so I can actually send, let me forward that newsletter to you really quick, and we can show folks the one that you did.
And I will certainly send the whole presentation out with this recording. But before we kind of open it up, and I'll post some specific questions to John to get a little bit more take on trends in social media. But do you all have any kind of offers or things that we should keep in mind in the next 6 months? I know you really reached out thinking, like, hearing some trends that were happening with childcare providers, which I thought was so interesting.
Yeah, so actually March, in our March edition, we normally have an early childhood education focus. So our editorial team puts together an editorial feature on hot topic of the day. So that will be in our March issue. And then I don't know if you want to share your screen again, that next slide actually shows what we're doing for that. So we're doing something called an early childhood education showcase. And so it's basically an elevated business listing for your center. And then we also have a companion newsletter that will go out. And so that next slide actually shows some examples of that. So that package for the showcase listing, if you scroll back up one slide. So this will be in our March issue. So that middle graphic there is what the early childhood education showcase looks like. So you get a graphic and your, obviously your center's name, contact info, and then a description. So that is going to run in the March issue of the magazine. And then there's also a companion newsletter that you see to the right, where we highlight several early learning centers together in that newsletter. And that particular newsletter goes out to about 11,000 parents.
Wow.
Well, it could be anywhere, really. They can sign up from anywhere. So that package for both of those pieces is $500. So that will have you included in 30,000 magazines and then the 11,000 emails. So that's a really great way to get your center out there. And then additionally, we'll be doing another one of those in July, kind of just before the school year. If folks still have openings, that tends to be a good time for early learning centers to promote that. So that's what we're going to be doing coming up.
That's great. Well, I'm gonna stop share for a second. drives me crazy not to see folks' faces.
Get John in here.
Yeah, John's so quiet. But I know I said I would post some questions because I wasn't really asking for, you know, a presentation as much as I wanted to really put some of experts and many of our folks in the field are experts in their own right. And so I want to talk a little bit about paid social media and anything that you've seen lately. I know, John, I just saw Facebook is just constantly making changes. I saw that they announced today that they're not going to let political groups get presented as aggressively in their marketplace as they have. And I know that I'm regularly flagged and I get put in Facebook jail mistakenly, which you all have helped me get out of Facebook jail. But are there any trends that we should keep in mind or things when we're trying to use social media for our small budgets?
Yeah, I'll address that question first, since you brought it up. For those of you that have executed sorry, I was making a couple notes to make sure I didn't forget anything, but for those of you who have had those issues, which is probably all of you, if you've done any kind of paid Facebook promotion on your post, even if you're just trying to boost a post, obviously it came into the news a lot this year with the election and the political ads suspension, but it's really important to remember that rule and that policy is political and issues of national importance. A lot of times that issues of national importance gets minimalized, but it's for almost all of you. It's the reason that your ad is getting denied and getting rejected. One of the things, most of our issues that we're worried about, even though they're not political in the way that we're speaking about them, can be flagged by Facebook as issues of national importance. There's a couple of tips, I guess, that can help you reduce the number of times that will be flagged. The first is to, whenever possible, don't use the word you, i.e. when you're talking to an audience and you're describing something and say, you might be this, you might be doing this, you may need this help, you may need this support. As soon as you describe that person, or you take the content that you're trying to create and you somewhat project it onto the audience, that's a flag for Facebook. And what you have to, at this point, what's important to remember is that for almost all of those posts that are being flagged, the first time they're being flagged, it's being flagged by an AI or a robot or a computer or whatever you want to call it. So don't get frustrated if something that you think is clearly within the rules and is definitely not, shouldn't fall into those categories, because it's probably a robot or AI that is flagging it. Use the review function and just be clear in what you're describing of, this is why it's not an issue of national importance, or this is why this is just a direct ad. And most often, I'm not going to guarantee all the time, but most often you will get that overturned. But it helps to use the description and the copy in more general terms, as opposed to telling your audience that this may be happening to you. So you can almost flip that language a little bit, and you'll have a much better success rate in getting that through through those filters. Another thing that's important to keep in mind, it's going to be a little advanced for what most of you are doing, because of the types of promotion or paid campaigns that I imagine you're running, or that I'm familiar with, is that you're going to hear a lot about the iOS 14. That's Apple's mobile phone operating system, the software it runs on. You're going to hear a lot about the changes that they're making to consumer tracking, i.e. that the phone will follow you from one web application or website to another. Changes that Apple are making that are changing your abilities to use Facebook advertising. And Facebook is not creating a system for Apple and a system for desktop and for Android phones. They're creating one system that is going to be significantly less capable than the current system, and it's happening right now. We don't know exactly when the changes are going to go into effect, but it's any day now. At a very high level, without getting into the details, it's going to e-commerce advertiser much more than many of you that are either doing promotion and ads for awareness or doing promotion and ads for conversions that are like form fills or signups, those types of button clicks on the website. But it will shrink the ability to create remarketing audiences off your website, which is a really great way to use social advertising, essentially to take people that have visited your website and targeting those folks with ads. And it will impact your ability to track a number of conversions on your website. I think at a high level, you just need to be aware and not worried that it's going to have a huge impact on what you're doing. I wouldn't recommend not using Facebook anymore. They're working very hard to build tools that will, I mean, this is a major revenue source for them. So they're working very hard to build tools that will help with that advertising. But above all, good quality content that drives interest and drives engagement will still, even in paid campaigns, continue to drive success. So if you hear about it, don't worry, don't stress. It's the biggest impact is going to be on e-commerce and strictly B2C type companies. There will be an impact, but good content still triumphs. The other thing that I think I'd start off and mention is, and some of this is a little personal that I've been noticing. We do run a lot of campaigns that are either local or regional, whether that's the Front Range, whether that's the state of Colorado, and we do run a lot of campaigns for our clients that are targeting parents. And when you're looking at that audience, whether you're looking at a Front Range audience or you're looking at a state of Colorado audience, that parents audience across the state or across the Front Range isn't very large. There's a lot of, even just looking at all the organizations here on this call, there are a lot of different advertisers, even not including the B2C and other advertisers that are out there that are fighting for parents' attention. And one of the things that we've seen and that I've noticed, I have two boys. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. They're the best. I get little to no, I can think of less than 10 ads that I've ever been served, and I mean ever, since they were born, as a dad. Enough to the point where I actually went into Facebook's, you can go into Facebook and see the profile they built for you. He likes sports, he likes this, he likes this. Dad was in there. So when somebody targets specifically dads or Colorado dads, I'm in that audience. I've seen very, very few, where when I compare that to my wife's page, it's parent and mom ad after ad after ad after ad. Obviously, there's a reason for that. We've seen that in general, these are very general terms. In general, dads or moms will respond to that content more often. However, by looking at if it's relevant at your audience and looking at both parents and creating ads that are, I wouldn't say custom, but that speak to them and say things in a way that might get their attention, will help you to break through that clutter. Because by just targeting at times parents at large, especially if you're doing school recruitment and you're looking at a very constrained geographic range too, then by targeting that message to segments within the parent audience, like moms specific ads and dads specific ads, you'll have a lot more success, and you'll see drastic differences in the delivery cost, the cost it takes to show the ad on the dad side. So you may see less success as far as people clicking through, but you'll also see a lower cost. So it tends to even out. It's something that I've noticed a lot of people aren't doing in their campaigns, is looking at how can we speak to these two groups somewhat differently.
I love that tip. And it reminds me that Colorado has recently begun a fatherhood initiative to engage with fathers. We have several Circle of Parents Fathers groups that when I secure more funding to run small ads to boost participation there, I will surely take a shot at using that tip. And I love the tip about not using the word you in the content. Any other tips on creative? Is does video fare well better than static images? Anything in the images that are particularly see a better response that you all see?
That's a great question. My top level feedback there would be, when possible, use both. What we've seen almost across the board, obviously it depends on the quality of the image, the uniqueness of the image, or the quality of the video and the uniqueness of the video. But in general, costs to deliver that video are higher. There's less inventory. There's less inventory across the social networks to deliver the video. Remember, Facebook is a network now. It's not just your news feed. So where it may be easy to show you a video ad in your newsfeed, it isn't always as easy to show you that video on some of their off Facebook partners. There's more image inventory essentially than there is video. There's also, there can be, depending on who you're trying to reach, less competition. So what we've seen is that it costs less to get the image in front of the audience. However, you'll have, and this is almost the same, the same balance we were talking about with dads and moms, is you'll see a better response to video if it's a quality video that has the message up front, can draw the interest, but the cost is high enough that the image can also drive conversions, and it costs less to deliver. User behavior is also different. While everything we talk about, even when we're talking just about the state of Colorado or the Front Ranges, we have to generalize at some level, right? We have to say, well, on average, the videos perform better. That doesn't mean that there aren't users who prefer visuals, or who respond better to a visual than video. Some people love video. Some people don't like it or don't have an opportunity to view it in their setting. And what you will see is that you'll drive results with both. So if you can include both, I recommend including both options. Another piece about video to consider for some of this group when you're trying to reach a statewide audience, it's changing. Cellular infrastructure is improving. Wi-Fi saturation is improving. There's still a lot of rural folks who have slow connections, and a video isn't feasible. It takes too long to load for them, or it's a lower quality when they're not on Wi-Fi. And an image, because of that, images can be served more often if they have a lower latency or a less strong connection, because they either don't have a good cell signal or they have no or poor Wi-Fi. Then visuals Facebook will actually switch to showing more visuals, because it's bad experience for the user, because the video, when they click it, has to load, and they can't load them in advance and things like that.
That makes so much sense. From a Colorado parent, I mean, thank goodness, you guys probably had to shift a whole bunch during COVID. Have you had any experiences with video that could be helpful to share?
Yeah, we're finding that video is getting the most engagement on our Facebook channel. But that said, a good visual period is going to do great. And we also have Instagram, and I know that not everybody is doing Instagram, but to reach moms, they seem to be kind of flocking to Instagram, even maybe more than Facebook these days. And basically, Instagram stories are great. If you have 3 great images, stories are doing really well for click-throughs and engagement. And also Facebook, good images helps with clicks. But overall, if you just do a regular Instagram post, that's usually just more for branding. At least that's what we're finding on our channels. Again, it could be different on individual channels.
I'm finding that anytime I'm posting organically, certainly on Facebook, of just like a news story with just text and the link pulled through, that I get far less reach and response with that. But if I include that same content and use an image along with that, and just have a live hyperlink in the text of it, it fares much better. But I'm purely like trial and error and monitoring what I'm doing constantly. And so is there anything behind that, or am I just making that up in my head?
Well, I'd be curious to see if you were looking at, it sounds like you're looking at you're comparing the engagement between the two. Now, I'd be curious to hear what the results on click-throughs were as well.
Yeah, that I'm not really able to track through click-throughs there, but am looking more closely at impressions and reach from that particular post.
What I'd hypothesize, obviously we'd want to see data to see if to back this up, is that post where you're using an image with the link in the copy and not using the link preview, which pulled in the headline and the image from the site, is that you are getting more engagement and reach, but you are getting fewer click-throughs. Whereas if you looked at the other version, you're getting less engagement, perhaps significantly less engagement, but getting more click-throughs, at least on a click-through rate perspective, based on the number of people doing it. So I think understanding what is my goal here. Do I want people to see this post? Does this post get across the key message that I hope that they take away? Or B, do I really want them to click through? And I'd rather have fewer people see the post, but more people click through. Understanding, obviously we would want both, but if we had to choose which one is more important to us, and then that's a great use case for UTM codes and UTM tracking. So that's that fun little extension at the end of your link. Anything after a question mark in a URL is what's called a UTM code, and all that does is tell Google Analytics how to segment that data. It basically says, hey, put this in the Facebook bucket, or put this in the Facebook with a link, and put this in the Facebook with an image bucket. And it will, in that code, it tells Google Analytics how to organize it or bucket segment that content. And that will give you that click-through information that you're looking for, so that you can truly say, well, I may want clicks more, but I found that by doing it with an image and a link there, I get more engagement at a rate that's high enough to drive still more clicks. It also allows you to go a little bit beyond clicks and say, well, doing it this way got me 100 clicks, but they stayed on the website for 10 seconds or 5 seconds and then left. But doing it this way got me 20 clicks, but they each stayed on the site for 45 seconds or a minute. And understanding that different behavior can add just a whole lot more context to really which one was more successful or unsuccessful. Have any of you, are you familiar with UTM codes, or no? Let me put a little link in the chat.
I would say if I had enough time in life to set all that up, but I don't.
It's Katie, I promise it's not that hard to set up.
Well, we're running a little bit over time. If you would be willing to share a little bit of information, and it sounds like a fun little blog article that I'd be happy to write. If you want to help me out and share that information with folks, that would be awesome. But I'm so appreciative of you both joining us here today. I didn't see any questions in the chat, but just want to pause and see if anyone, I'm going to save this link, John.
Yep, and I'd be happy to talk through it with you.
And we'll share both your contact information in case anyone wants to connect. But anyone have any questions or anything before we let John and Brigette go? Well,
I was wondering, I'm not part of necessarily like early childhood in the realms of classrooms, but more mental health. And I'm wondering because I'm the one-off here, might I be able to connect with either one of you guys directly and learn a little bit more about how I might get some specific content to parents, different things like that?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I will share out. chat your information, and we've got it in the chat, but I will share it out to everyone, and highly recommend working with both CenterTable and Colorado Parent. We always have a great experience, but had a great experience last year. It was a hard year to brainstorm how the heck to reach people in the midst of this pandemic, and both of you were instrumental. We were able to reach over 10 million impressions, tracked all my ROI for the year, and both of you were instrumental in that. So thank you so much.